Talk show host talking about gun control. We have Steve Doocy that's in Las Vegas live anchoring the show from out there. We also want to bring in Ben Shapiro. He's from thedailywire.com, a syndicated columnist and host of the Ben Shapiro Show, to talk about this very issue with the late night host.
Steve, you have a question for Ben?
Absolutely. Ben, I got a question for you. You know, many, as we just saw the late night host talking about how there needs to be more gun control. But when you look at what they found in the car of this guy, that ammonium nitrate, you just add the fuel oil to it, and you've got an Oklahoma City bomb there as well. What gun control law would have stopped that guy from doing what he did back there?
I mean, even the guns that he was using, I'm not sure that there's any evidence that gun control would have done anything. I mean, he obtained, apparently, these weapons legally. He had gone through federal background checks. There's no evidence of significant mental illness to this point. So all this seems like is people shouting, do something, while they have no particular solutions and no expertise on guns or gun control. I mean, the suggestion that gun control is going to put an end to incidents like this, again, that is an evidenceless proposition based on nothing but emotional response.
I was looking at Jimmy Kimmel last night, and he said, well, for those of you on television all day that tell me not to talk about gun control, my First Amendment is just as important as your Second Amendment. Ben, what's your reaction to that?
Well, I mean, no one is talking about stopping him from talking. I mean, I would never try to ban Jimmy Kimmel from talking on television. He should stop trying to ban me from owning a firearm. And again, nothing that the late night hosts are saying has any sort of relationship to reality. If they want to call for an outright gun ban, if they want to call for all guns in the United States to be removed, then we can at least get an honest assessment of what it is they believe. But when they say things like a little bit of common sense gun control would stop all of this, that's just a chimera. It's not true. They're making things up because this is all about the moral disapproval of people who own guns. And that's what drips from a lot of these folks, is this idea that if you oppose them on policy, it's because you don't care enough about what happened in Las Vegas. And that really is, that's quite disgusting. I mean, the idea that if we disagree on politics, it's because my heart isn't big enough, but your heart is just big enough so you understand Jimmy Kimmel or Stephen Colbert or Seth Meyers. You understand truly what America needs because you care so much. That's pretty nasty stuff.
So what is the issue here? What do we need to be talking about?
Well, I mean, I think we don't have enough information yet to know what sort of policy proposals would be on the table. This is one of the things that drives me nuts about this. Mass shootings are actually a pretty terrible way of determining policy because the sample size is so low, because it tends to be non-representative of deaths involving guns in the United States overall, for a variety of reasons. I mean, if we actually want to talk about gun violence across the United States, we'd actually have to start talking about, if you're going to talk gun control, then let's talk about democratic areas in major cities, because that's where virtually all of the murder, or at least a huge percentage of the murder, is taking place in the United States. Even that, though, would be, I think, a false premise, because the fact is that the number of guns in the United States has gone up as the murder rate has gone down. Per capita, there are now 1.45 guns per American in the United States. There were less than 1 gun per American in the United States in 1993, and the murder rate has declined markedly since that time. So the idea that more guns equals more crime, or more guns invariably equals more mass shooting, the evidence is really weak on this stuff.
Yeah, so what does that tell you? Does that tell you that more people owning guns with murder rates going down? Is it because we feel like using a gun we can protect ourselves more, or owning a gun?
Well, I mean, I think there's a case to be made for that. The truth is that correlation in these cases doesn't always equal causation. So saying more guns, less crime, it may be just as wrong as saying less guns, more crime. But by the same token, to suggest that if we just remove guns, that's going to send the crime rate down, it's not true. People keep talking about things like Australia, where there was a big gun buyback. And the fact is that in Australia, they only removed 1/3 to 1/5 of guns. The gun crime rate was declining markedly before that, and the United States is not the same as Australia. Try going to Texas and telling everybody they need to hand their guns over to the federal government and see how the gun rate, the gun death rate goes up.
I also tell the people in England how safe they are when they've had 5 attacks over the last year, and they have very few guns over there, as well as France.
Even law enforcement doesn't carry guns, right?
As well as Spain. True, good point, Ainsley. And finally, I didn't know, I'm not a gun guy, I don't pretend to be, but now I'm finding about these bump fire stocks that allow a semi-automatic to be an automatic. And the fact is, according to the ATF, it was actually legal to do. Would you, as a pro-gun guy, entertain the fact that we get rid of some of that conversion?
Yeah, I think I would. I mean, the fact is that the machine guns have been illegal for sale since 1986 in the United States. Devices that can convert a semi-auto to fire like an auto, I think there's pretty widespread support for getting rid of some of these devices. That said, a bump stock is very easy to make yourself, to imitate. Firing a semi-auto at a high rate is not particularly difficult to train to do. So I think that we can do it. I wouldn't use it as this sort of this panacea. I don't think that you can use it as a cure-all. The idea that that would cure these problems, the vast majority of mass shootings
did an entire shtick yesterday because Donald Trump Jr. put out a tweet. And the tweet that Donald Trump Jr. Put out was a tweet of his daughter, and he said that he was telling her that he was going to take half her candy on Halloween to teach her what socialism was. Okay, kind of funny. And Stephen Colbert goes after Donald Trump Jr., as Stephen Colbert is apt to do.
Last night, Don Jr. tweeted a picture of his young daughter holding her candy bucket and said, "I'm going to take half of her candy tonight and give it to some kid who sat at home. It's never too early to teach her about socialism." Yes, it's never too early to teach kids the danger of sharing. On Halloween, kids literally go door to door to get free candy from the neighbors because the kids don't have it and the neighbors do. That's socialism. Also, give it to some kid who sat at home. You know Halloween is fun, right? No child in the history of childing has ever voluntarily missed Halloween. I'm worried that kid didn't go out. Why? Is he okay? Is that child caring for a sick parent? You know what would be a nice thing to do? Give him half your Halloween candy.
Okay, so this is such a misread of socialism, it's quite astonishing. So first of all, Halloween is not socialism, and sharing is not socialism. Voluntary sharing is not socialism. Okay, voluntary sharing is not socialism. It's called charity. We do it all the time. Okay, when you give out candy on Halloween, you're not being a socialist. You are sharing things. Okay, socialism is when the government forces you to share things. Socialism is when the government comes in and mandates that you share your candy, Stephen Colbert, you stupid idiot. Okay, the idea that socialism is just sharing is belied by, the 100 million dead people over the last century who failed to share voluntarily enough and therefore were taken off to the gulags or shot in mass graves. So no, not quite the same thing. As far as this idea that, there's a poor child in need and so you should really give that child half your candy, again, that's up to me. I may agree with you, Stephen Colbert, but the idea that Donald Trump Jr.'s daughter should have to give half her candy, I think that the better plan there would probably be for Donald Trump Jr.'s very wealthy man to get that kid some candy if that kid needs charity. But I'm not going to enforce it with the power of government. So, again, the deliberate misread on socialism here is pretty astonishing, and it just shows how the left thinks about socialism. They think about it as a benevolent, wonderful thing that really has no downside, except for the whole we have to shoot people if they refuse to abide by my version of what charity ought to constitute. Okay. Quick big idea here on the Ben Shapiro Show. So every Thursday we go through a big idea. One of the big ideas today that we're going to do is stare decisis. So Clarence Thomas did an interview with Laura Ingraham, which was quite good yesterday. Laura clerked for Thomas on the Supreme Court, and Thomas was asked about his judicial philosophy. And I'm going to explain what differentiates Clarence Thomas from Justice Scalia and why I actually prefer Clarence Thomas to Justice Scalia's jurisprudence, even though I love Justice Scalia's writing.
Your philosophy is described as alternatively formalistic, rigid, strictly conservative. How do you describe your philosophy, Justice?
I think it's get it right. It's I think we are required to reason to a conclusion, and that's what we try to do, and try to do it in a way that it is accessible to regular people.
And when you read Thomas's decisions, first of all, they are very clear and they're very easy to read. But one of the things that differentiates Clarence Thomas from Justice Scalia is Justice Scalia believed to a certain extent in stare decisis. That literally means the case has been decided. It's what we call precedent. And the problem with Justice Scalia's take on this is that if you believe in precedent, you have to pick and choose which precedent you choose to uphold. And you either have a blanket rule that a case that has been decided on similar merits must stand, or you can choose a rule that says, I don't care what the case decided before. If it's not right, then it's not right. Cases in which this comes up, Roe v. Wade, right? Do we abide by Roe v. Wade? It's stare decisis, right? It's a case that's been decided about abortion. Do we just abide by it, or is the case wrong? Thomas would say, I don't care whether the case has already been decided. They got it wrong. I'm going to overrule it. The same thing holds true for things like Dred Scott or Plessy v. Ferguson or Buck v. Bell. There are a bunch of really bad cases in American history. Korematsu. Bunch of really bad cases in American history. Do you just abide by them because stare decisis? So Justice Scalia never really had a consistent rule as to which cases he would abide by, which precedent he would abide by. Thomas does have a consistent rule. That rule is if the case is wrong, I overrule it. And the case can be wrong based on them getting the case wrong at the time. This is why I think that Justice Thomas is actually a more conservative justice, a more constitutional justice than Justice Scalia, even though they voted together most of the time. Thomas's jurisprudence is, I think, more solid and a better basis for constitutionalism than Justice Scalia's, even though I'm a big Scalia admirer, and Scalia was quite brilliant. Okay, so we'll be back. John Oliver of HP.